The Changeling by Victor LaValle. The story begins in 1968 Queens, during a citywide garbage strike, where Lillian Kagwa, a sharp, composed immigrant from Uganda, bearing the trauma of her cousin Arthur's murder by Ugandan secret police, meets Brian West, a short, stocky, and persistent parole officer from Syracuse with his own troubled past involving alcoholic parents. Lillian works as a secretary for a dubious modeling agency, Glamour Time, run by one of Brian's parolees, Pavel Arasenyev. Brian, initially investigating Pavel, becomes smitten with Lillian. His constant presence disrupts Pavel's scams, leading Pavel to fire Lillian. In retaliation, Brian finds grounds to violate Pavel's parole, sending him back to jail. Lillian, annoyed at losing her well-paying job, cuts off contact with Brian. 8 years later, in 1976, Lillian, now 33 and valuing stability, finally agrees to a date with the equally persistent Brian. He takes her to see Rocky, a film whose theme of the underdog dreamer resonates with both survivors. In the darkened theater, a connection forms. A shared dream of parenthood is conceived. Though their son Apollo wouldn't be born until September 1977, conceived after that first date, Brian, embracing fatherhood, finds joy in his son, nicknaming him the god Apollo. They settle into a 2-bedroom apartment in Jackson Heights. However, this idyllic period is short-lived. By Apollo's 4th birthday, Brian West vanishes without a trace, leaving Lillian and Apollo to navigate the world alone. Shortly after his father's disappearance, young Apollo is plagued by a recurring nightmare. A man knocks, Apollo lets him in, and the man removes his face to reveal Brian West. Fog spills from Brian's mouth, filling the apartment, accompanied by the sound of rushing water. His father picks him up, speaks the words, "You're coming with me," and Apollo wakes screaming, not from fear, but from a deep longing for the father who didn't take him. Lillian, now a single mother, working long hours and studying to become a legal secretary, raises the bookish, watchful Apollo. They erase Brian West from their lives, Lillian reverting to her maiden name and legally changing Apollo's last name to Kagwa. Years pass quietly until Apollo is 12. One afternoon in 1989, after playing outside, Apollo hears insistent knocking at their apartment door. Drawn by a strange feeling, remembering his childhood nightmare, as steam billows from the shower he'd just turned on, he rushes to the door. The knocking stops. He opens it to find not his father, but a heavy cardboard box labeled Improbabilia. Inside are mementos from his parents' past, movie ticket stubs, Rocky, a headshot, apartment rental agreements, receipts, their marriage certificate, and a worn children's book. Outside Over There by Maurice Sendak, Lillian recognizes the box as Brian's, but is baffled by its appearance. Apollo becomes engrossed in the contents, particularly the Sendak book, imagining his father reading it to him, fueling his already present love for reading. Lillian, noticing Apollo selling the books and magazines she brings home from her law firm job, is initially annoyed, but then recognizes his entrepreneurial spirit, reminiscent of her own drive. She supports his burgeoning business, even getting him business cards. Apollo names his used book venture Improbabilia. School becomes secondary to his passion for finding and selling rare books. He learns the trade from older dealers, facing acceptance from some and racist suspicion from others, developing the mantra, "I am the god, Apollo," to cope with rejection and self-doubt. At 34, Apollo makes his biggest find, a collection of rare occult books belonging to a deceased couple, the D'Agostino's. Tucked inside a grimoire, he discovers a postcard from the infamous occultist Aleister Crowley, hinting at the couple's unconventional life. The find is lucrative, but highlights Apollo's profound loneliness. The D'Agostino's, however strange, had shared their peculiar passion. This realization sparks a desire for family in Apollo. Soon after, during a visit to the Fort Washington Branch Library, Apollo witnesses a petite, commanding librarian named Emma Valentine expertly handle a large, disruptive man demanding to use the restroom. Slim with narrow shoulders and slightly fuller hips, possessing an unwavering smile and undeniable authority, Emma captivates Apollo. Despite her initial refusals, she's planning a long trip to Brazil. Apollo persists. They finally have a date just before she leaves. Emma shares her story. Raised in Boone's Mill, Virginia, by her older sister Kim after their parents died young. Her love for libraries, fostered by a librarian named Miss Rook. Her fascination with Brazil, sparked by the film Quilombo. Apollo, smitten, impulsively declares his desire for fatherhood. Emma reveals she's leaving for Brazil indefinitely, but admits she'd begun looking forward to seeing him at the library sales. They share a passionate kiss. Emma leaves for Brazil. Apollo, unable to move on, immerses himself in his work and follows Emma's journey through letters and online news. He sells the D'Agostino collection, including the Crowley postcard, using the profits to help Lillian buy a house. After a year, Emma writes that she's returning. Apollo waits all night at JFK due to flight delays. When she arrives, looking weathered but beautiful, she wears a faded red string tied around her wrist by a woman in Salvador, Brazil. A charm tied with 3 wishes that will come true only when the string falls off naturally. Impulsively, Apollo cuts the string off her wrist with a plastic knife, promising, "With me, all 3 of your wishes will come true." Emma chooses to see his act as bold, not arrogant, and their life together truly begins. Years later, Apollo, now 37, is a successful rare book dealer. He and Emma live in Manhattan, expecting their first child in 2 weeks. While on a book buy in Ridgewood, Queens, evaluating the meager collection of the recently deceased Mr. Grabowski, Apollo finds a valuable first edition of James Webb's Fields of Fire. Torn between sympathy for the struggling widow, Mrs. Grabowski, and her oafish son Igor, and the financial pressures of impending fatherhood, Apollo deceives her, buying the valuable book along with a worthless one for a mere $50, rationalizing the act as necessary for his unborn child. He rushes downtown to meet Emma and her visiting friend Nichelle, a television writer, for an extravagant dinner at Boulay. The restaurant's opulent, fairy tale-like atmosphere feels surreal. Nichelle, already drunk, dominates the conversation. Apollo, shocked by the menu prices, eats only bread. As Emma, heavily pregnant, feels unwell and leaves for the restroom, Nichelle reveals unsettling details about Emma's time in Brazil. A nude photograph, taken by Emma herself in an abandoned factory, now hanging in an Amsterdam gallery. She looks like a fucking sorceress, Apollo, and hints about Emma's mysterious 3rd wish. Before Nichelle can reveal more, the waiter rushes over, shouting that Emma needs Apollo. She's gone into labor. Against Nichelle's frantic protests, Emma insists on taking the subway home to Washington Heights for their planned home birth with her sister Kim as the midwife. Apollo calls Kim, who is initially dismissive, being at a movie. On the nearly empty late-night A train, their journey is interrupted by a crew of young breakdancers. Showtime. Emma struggles with nausea and pain. At West 4th Street, the car fills with passengers, including a mother with 2 young children. Just past 59th Street, the express train stalls between stations, plunging them into darkness. True labor begins. Apollo, terrified but recalling his Bradley method training, guides Emma. The dancers, initially confrontational, become unlikely allies, fetching the conductor, who confirms a power outage and long delays for help, and blocking the view from curious passengers in other cars. The mother with the children offers water from a sippy cup and provides quiet, profound support to Emma. Amidst the chaos, Emma gives birth on the floor of the stalled train. Apollo catches their son. Overwhelmed, he impulsively suggests naming him Brian. Emma agrees. Apollo holds his newborn son against his skin, whispering, "Hello, Brian. I'm so happy to meet you." Paramedics arrive, taking Emma and baby Brian to Harlem Hospital. After 2 days, they return home. Emma struggles with breastfeeding. Lillian and Kim visit, Lillian offering surprisingly unhelpful advice. "It's too bad your breasts are the wrong shape." Apollo finds solace in his work, selling the Fields of Fire novel online. Life settles into the exhausting rhythm of new parenthood. 6 weeks later, Emma returns to her part-time library job, leaving Apollo to care for Brian. He takes Brian on a book buy with the tree screen in Riverdale. While Patrice explores the garage collection, Apollo takes Brian to the basement to investigate more boxes. He talks to the sleeping infant about Brian West and the Improbabilia box, reciting lines from Outside Over There. He finds nothing valuable until the very last box, where he discovers a near-perfect first edition of To Kill a Mockingbird, signed by Harper Lee to Pip Truman Capote, with the inscription, "Here's to the daddy of our dreams." Overjoyed and overwhelmed, Apollo screams with delight upon returning home, presenting the incredible find to Emma. The book promises financial security, a potential escape from their current struggles. Apollo carefully places the book, Emma's red string, the speeding ticket he got driving home excitedly, and the worthless book from Grabowski's sale into the Improbabilia box for safekeeping. Life continues. Apollo joins the new dads group at Bennett Park, sharing baby milestones and photos online excessively. Meanwhile, Emma grows increasingly withdrawn and distressed. On her first day back at work, she receives a disturbing photo on her phone. Brian lying on a blanket in the Riverdale driveway where Apollo had been, but the photo vanishes before she can investigate or show Apollo. Who took it? She becomes convinced someone is watching them, sending cryptic, menacing messages and photos that disappear. She installs blackout curtains in Brian's room and loses significant weight, her anxiety mounting despite starting Zoloft prescribed by Kim. Apollo, stressed and sleep-deprived himself, dismisses her fears, attributing them to postpartum anxiety or medication side effects. He starts having the old nightmare about his father again. One morning, Emma insists on taking Brian to be baptized immediately, revealing she's been receiving more disturbing photos, including one texted with the message, "Got him." Apollo finds her phone in the trash. Emma claims the photos disappear. Apollo, frustrated and scared by her behavior, accuses her. "You're what's wrong with our family, Emma. You are the problem. Go take another pill." Emma leaves, slamming the door, uttering ominously, "You don't see, but you will." Apollo locks her out. Later that day, Apollo wakes groggily in the kitchen, chained to a chair, a U-lock around his neck, tethering him to a hot steam pipe. The apartment is sweltering, radiators blasting. Rat poison pellets litter the floor. A kettle shrieks on the stove. He hears agonized screaming, realizes it's the kettle, then hears a child crying, Brian, from the back room, now sealed by the door Apollo had installed. A figure emerges from the dark room. Emma, gaunt, seemingly possessed, holding the scalding kettle on her bare palm without flinching. Apollo pleads with her, tries to reason with her, attributing her state to postpartum stress. She ignores him, hits him with a hammer, fracturing his cheekbone. As she walks back toward Brian's room with the kettle, Apollo, choking against the lock, begs her not to hurt their son. Emma turns, her voice clear and chilling. It's not a baby. She steps back into the room. Apollo hears a final terrible scream, then silence before losing consciousness. Apollo recovers physically in the hospital, but is emotionally shattered. Learning of Brian's death and Emma's disappearance from the news, he suffers a breakdown. Released to Lillian's care, he eventually returns to Washington Heights, but not home. He goes to Emma's library with a shotgun, taking her colleagues hostage, demanding information about Emma's whereabouts. After a 6-hour standoff, he surrenders. Emma's colleagues, incredibly, refuse to press charges. Apollo receives a 2-month sentence on Rikers Island, released before dawn. Apollo feels lost, eventually finding himself at Bennett Park. The other new dads, knowing his story from the news, are terrified of him, forming a protective barrier around their children. They ask him to leave. Crushed, Apollo retreats to his building's basement laundry room, where the super, Fabian, finds him. Fabian reveals he found Apollo and the baby after neighbors reported a terrible smell. He describes finding Apollo near death and then discovering the baby in the back room. Apollo attends a court-mandated support group for survivors of trauma. He shares his story hesitantly. Another attendee, a haggard woman, speaks of receiving disturbing photos of her child, photos that disappear, mentioning someone named Cal and the Wise Ones. She reveals her growing conviction that the child in the photos isn't her real daughter. Apollo, horrified by the parallels, recognizes the danger and urges the group leader to call the police before fleeing the meeting. Outside, he's confronted by William Wheeler, the seemingly innocuous man from the support group, who reveals Patrice sent him. He wants to buy the To Kill a Mockingbird. Wheeler admits he knew who Apollo was from the news about the subway birth, not the murder. Driven by his own grief after his wife Greta left him, Wheeler used his tech skills to research Apollo, finding kinship in Apollo's online expressions of paternal love. Apollo, needing normalcy, agrees to discuss the sale, sharing the story of finding the book. Wheeler reveals the book is a gift for his estranged wife, Greta, whose father read it to her. He hopes it will help reconcile them. Apollo feels a connection to Wheeler's story of flawed fatherhood. They arrange to finalize the sale. Apollo meets Patrice, and they take the LIRR to Long Beach. On the train, Patrice inadvertently reveals the existence of the Tribute to Baby Brian Facebook page, filled with vitriol, conspiracy theories, and morbid posts, administered by someone called Green Hair Harry. Apollo is devastated to learn his family's tragedy has become public spectacle. They meet Wheeler, who takes them to a rented boat, Child's Play, docked at a yacht club. Wheeler confesses the boat isn't his. He rented it using his app, Afloat, which currently only has this one boat listed. He reveals his real name is William Wheeler and shares his painful story. His wife Greta left him after the death of their younger daughter, Agnes, taking their older daughter, Grace, with her. He buys the book electronically for $70,000, hoping it will win Greta back. Apollo, moved, gives the book, newly wrapped, to William. Feeling the need to settle debts, Apollo meets Kim Valentine at the Mahayana Buddhist temple in Chinatown, a place of significance from when they hired her as midwife. He gives her a check for her services, post-dated. Kim, racked with guilt and exhaustion, tearfully admits her complicity wasn't a betrayal of Apollo, but an act of protection for her sister. As Apollo walks onto the Manhattan Bridge, he receives a text. Emma Valentine is alive. I can help you find her, followed by a map app opening on his phone, guiding him through Manhattan. He follows the moving red dot to Washington Square Park, where he finds William Wheeler waiting. Wheeler confesses he used his network of online friends, fellow tech-savvy individuals, motivated by shared, often dark interests, to track Emma. He reveals Emma is hiding on North Brother Island in the East River, and offers to take Apollo there by boat. Needing Apollo's help in return to reconcile with his wife Greta, whom he now believes is also on the island with Cal and the Wise Ones. Apollo, suspicious but desperate, agrees. He meets Patrice and Dana in their basement apartment, the Bat Cave. Patrice reveals Wheeler is a skilled programmer with a complex past. Apollo forwards Wheeler's video file to Patrice. They watch grainy surveillance footage pieced together by Wheeler's network, showing Emma escaping Manhattan via the water taxi from South Street Seaport, aided by Kim Valentine. Apollo, enraged and feeling utterly betrayed, texts Wheeler, I need that boat, I want your help. Apollo meets Wheeler at the Locust Point Yacht Club in the Bronx. Wheeler, having taught himself to operate the boat using online tutorials, takes Apollo out onto the East River under cover of night. On the water, Wheeler reveals the tribute to baby Brian. Facebook page administrator, Green Hair Harry, is Patrice. He also shows Apollo a menacing post from another user, Kindergarten, depicting the Titanic sinking, seemingly aimed at them. Wheeler warns Apollo about the dangers of online exposure and the lack of secrets in the digital age. They find North Brother Island shrouded in an unnatural darkness. Apollo spots firelight in a derelict building. He walks boldly into the courtyard of the abandoned hospital complex, shouting his presence, "I am the god Apollo." He's ambushed and brutally beaten by 4 women in green cloaks, wielding chair legs as clubs. They incapacitate him and carry him away on a makeshift stretcher. They attempt to drown him in the river, but he fights back fiercely. Recognizing him as Emma's, they spare him but confiscate his keys and phone, which he dropped. They tell him Cal will see him. He's taken to the old school building, where he meets Cal, Callisto Pearl Walker, an older woman with playful yet commanding energy, guarded by 2 imposing twin women armed with nail-studded maces. Cal explains the island is a sanctuary for women who've dealt with changelings, women who, like the mothers in fairy tales, did seemingly impossible, sometimes monstrous, things to protect or reclaim their real children. She uses the story of Rapunzel to illustrate the dangers of both neglectful and overprotective parenting, hinting at the nature of changelings and the illusions, glamour, surrounding them. As they talk, William Wheeler shouts from the courtyard, revealing he followed them. Best way to clear the air is to have it all out in the open. Cal orders both men taken to the seclusion rooms in the tuberculosis pavilion, locked in adjacent mesh cages. William reveals his deception. He knew Cal, having searched for her and Greta for months. He admits his online persona and network helped track Emma, but insists his desire to help Apollo reconcile with Emma is tied to his own need to reunite with Greta and their surviving daughter, Grace. He reveals their younger daughter, Agnes, died, implying Greta was somehow responsible, but that he now understands her grief. He pleads with Apollo, help convince Greta to forgive him. And in return, William will help Apollo find Emma. He then reveals he's called in the cavalry, a dangerous, unspecified force, and warns Apollo that if he refuses, everyone on the island will die. Cal releases Apollo at dawn, revealing Emma told her he would come. She gives him a copy of Outside Over There, urging him to understand the fairy tale reality he's entered. She takes him to the communal dining hall, explaining Emma visited the island for 3 months, using a creek boat to ferry library books for the children. Apollo sees the community of women and children. Cal confirms they all experienced what Emma did. Greta Wheeler arrives, fetched by boat. She confronts Apollo, revealing William stole the $70,000 from her account and defaced the To Kill a Mockingbird by writing Agnes on every page. Apollo spends the day bonding with a toddler named Gail. That evening, during Cal's Rapunzel puppet show, Greta tells Cal William killed Agnes. Apollo realizes William lied again. Explosions rock the island. William's cavalry arrives, revealed not as human forces, but as the troll itself, summoned or controlled somehow by William Kindergarten and his network. The library collapses, killing Greta. The wise ones evacuate onto their trawler, the Maricat. Cal stays behind, giving Apollo the creek boat and her gun, telling him Emma believed Brian was alive, hidden in the Forest Park in Queens. Cal confronts the approaching troll, sacrificing herself. Apollo paddles desperately across the East River, haunted by Cal's warning. The big one can swim. Apollo returns to his apartment, collapses, then spends days recovering, haunted by Jorgen's story of Askeladden and the troll. He visits Brian's grave at Nassau Knolls Cemetery with Patrice. They dig up the grave. Inside the casket, beneath the concrete liner, they find not Brian's body, but a grotesque bundle of matted hair, bones, teeth, and fingernails, the Changeling. As Apollo holds it, bugs spill from its mouth, and it tries to suckle blood from his cut finger. Horrified, but understanding Emma's actions, Apollo reburies the creature and removes the grave marker. Apollo returns home, realizing Emma was right. He sleeps, then calls Lillian. She finally reveals the full truth about Brian West. Years ago, after she served him divorce papers, he returned, tried to scald 4-year-old Apollo to death in the bathtub, intending a murder-suicide. Lillian arrived home just in time and stopped him, implying she killed him. Apollo, reeling from this revelation and understanding his father's actions through the lens of desperate, broken love and fear of abandonment mirrored in Outside Over There, feels a profound shift in his understanding of his past and himself. He hangs up with Lillian just as he realizes someone turned off the space heaters in Jorgen's den while he was on the island. Kindergarten/William must have been in the house. Apollo tells Emma, who intuits William is Kindergarten. They return to the den, Emma knocking down the screens, hiding the wall of children's portraits, Kindergarten's ancestors' victims. Emma sets the den on fire. They retrieve Brian's clothes from the suitcase. Apollo takes the knife from Jorgen's throat. They flee the burning house through a hidden basement entrance Jorgen must have used. In the basement, they find Kindergarten at his computer station, wounded but watching a live feed of a family in Charleston via their hacked laptop, surrounded by screens showing other men, his network, watching along. Emma attacks him with the mattock Apollo brought from the suitcase. Kindergarten, bleeding profusely, admits he monetized the troll, offering paid subscriptions to watch the creature and its captive children via hidden cameras in the cave. He claims Brian is still alive, protected somehow. Before he can show proof, Emma kills him with a final blow to the head. As the house burns above them, Apollo discovers Kindergarten's blood dripping into a hole hidden beneath the boiler, a tunnel. He calls Patrice one last time, instructing him to put his Daylight app, which mimics sunlight, in the App Store for $70,000, reclaiming the stolen money. Apollo buys the app. He and Emma descend into the tunnel. In the darkness, Emma confesses her light, her power, was fueled by desperation and loneliness, urging Apollo to share the burden now. The tunnel opens into a large underground cavern, the troll's lair. They find Brian alive, sleeping in a storage bin. As Emma lifts him, the troll awakens. It's enormous, ancient, and nearly blind, relying on smell. Apollo realizes the Brennivin he accidentally soaked himself in masked his scent. Emma activates the Daylight app. The light stuns the troll, but doesn't kill it. Apollo lures the troll out of the cave into the forest above, using the story Jorgen told him as a guide, taunting it. He uses the sheep's head from Jorgen's offering as bait. The troll, enraged, pursues him. Apollo hides in trees, leading the troll on until dawn approaches. The troll, weakened and confused, is finally turned to stone by the true daylight. Emma appears. Brian was swallowed whole by the troll just before it exited the cave. Together, they cut Brian free from the troll's petrified stomach. Exhausted and traumatized, they emerge from Forest Park. Apollo realizes the red string is gone. They wait at a bus stop. Apollo uses the Metro card given by the police the night before. As the Q11 bus approaches like a chariot, Emma speaks of her third wish, a life full of adventure. They acknowledge the impossibility of happily ever after, finding solace in the present moment. Today, and they lived happily today. Apollo replies, "That's everything, my love." The family boards the bus, heading towards an uncertain future, forever changed, but together. If you enjoyed this book breakdown, please consider liking this video and subscribing to get notified when we post our next book.